Yo, what is up guys? It is Matthew Maz Fishing and I want to say welcome back to another video. This is going to be another video in our how to float fish series. In this video we are going to be going over how to actually set up your leader in order to catch some steelhead. So first of all, make sure you guys check out the other videos as they will essentially set the stage and set you up to get to the point that we are at now with our float properly set up and our weights below to cock the float in place properly. So like I said, in this video we are going to focus on the actual rig and how you would set that up. So the first step after you have your weights on is to actually get a swivel. These are a little prototype swivel I've been testing out for silver bullet baits. And all we're gonna do is grab these guys and tie it onto your line. So having a swivel is super important for a couple of reasons. First off, it helps to eliminate line twist. So essentially what line twist is exactly as the name suggests. It's when your line becomes all twisted up and it actually is very annoying to manage. You can see that's kind of an example of what line twist would look like. And it just makes it a lot harder to fish and a bit of a nuisance. So when you put a swivel onto your line, it helps to reduce that. The swivels have a little pivot point in the center that allows them to spin, which completely gets rid of all that line twist. So when I am using a swivel, I go for the smallest swivels I can find for a couple of reasons. The main one being that these steelhead see very well. You want to reduce as much bulk as possible down your line from underneath your float to make sure that your presentation looks natural, there's nothing suspicious or anything like that that might deter a fish from biting. So you guys can see that one's super tiny. All we're gonna do now is tie that up to the bottom of our line. Okay guys, so I now tie that swivel on. All I essentially use is a Palomar knot. It's extremely simple. I'm not gonna show you guys how to do it because there are absolutely plenty of videos online. The odds are you probably already know how to tie this knot, but here is now what our rig looks like. We have our float going down to our weights with our teeny weeny little swivel on the end there. The next step now is to actually get your leader and start tying that up. In regards to our leader line, the first thing I want to touch up on is the actual material we're going to use. So here's two different leader lines here. One's actually 4-pound, one of them's actually 6-pound. But the main thing I want to really drill into your head is the material we use. We use fluorocarbon. Now fluorocarbon is used for a few reasons. First off, it's extremely abrasion resistant. So if you don't know what that means, if you're brushing up on brush and logs and rocks and whatever, fluorocarbon doesn't tend to actually get nicks in the line itself. It stays nice and strong and is the most abrasion resistant type of line that you can get. This is very important when steelheading, especially because we are, for the most part, fishing in these rivers and these creeks, which tend to have a lot of brush and timber and rocks and stuff like that. Super nasty stuff that has the potential to break you off. So for the pound test that I tend to use, it depends on what brand of line. So if you guys didn't know this already, different brands will actually rate their lines differently. So if you take a look here, this is some 4-pound Drennan fluorocarbon. This is my favorite type of line to use. It is quite expensive. As I said, it's 4-pound. It's about $16 for 50 meters, but you can see right there, we have our diameter, which in millimeters, it is 0.20. Now, if you come over and look at our Seagar, this is a 6-pound Seagar. This is the STS fluorocarbon line. The diameter on this guy is 0.205 millimeters. But this is a 6-pound line. This is a 4-pound line. So what really matters is the actual way that these brands rate their fluorocarbon in terms of the diameter, because the 6-pound Seagar is actually very similar to 4-pound Drennan. Drennan kind of overcompensates for their line, so when you're using Drennan, make sure that you scale down. So now that we know what type of line we're going to use and what pound test, we are going to actually tie up our leader. So the first thing we're going to do, grab the line. There's no specific instruction or length to this, but typically I want to go around 2.5 feet, depending on where I'm fishing. If you're fishing shallow rivers, you're going to want to go shallower, a little bit shorter on that leader. You might want to go say like 1.5 feet, 2 feet. If you are fishing deeper, you might go anywhere from even 4 to about 6 feet. That's pretty rare, but it is something that can happen, especially if you're fishing somewhere like Niagara, which tends to be a lot deeper. So there we have it, guys. We now have our line. Going from here, it's almost about an arm span. My arms aren't completely expanded, but yeah. Next step, we are going to take the other end of that swivel and tie our leader to it. So once again, I use a very simple Palomar knot. It's a very strong knot. It works for just about every application you could ever want it to. So I'm not going to show you guys how to do this, but this is what I use. So there you guys have it. Now we have our float with our weights to our swivel to our leader line below it. Now, another super important thing to note, you will always want to have a weaker leader line than main line. The reason for this being, if you were to break off, if you get snagged, if you get caught in some timber, or even on a fish, since our leader line in this case is only 6 pound, my main line is 10 pound. So this is gonna break after our leader line. So if you were to break off, now you're only gonna be losing your leader line and essentially what's tied up to your leader. Sometimes you only lose actually what's from the hook or a little bit higher, so you can use the same leader over again. But for this reason, it saves you a ton of money, it saves you some time on the water, you don't have to continuously retie all of this, and it makes sure that you actually save your float as well as your weights and your swivel. So now that we have our line tied on, the next thing to do is actually tie our bait. So the first thing I'm gonna actually go over is how to fish a bead. Bead's what I use 95% of the time, if not more. I almost always have a bead tied onto my line. Even if I'm throwing a row bag, I'll use a bead and bag combo, etc. Some people even use them with flies. Personally, I don't, but that's gonna be the first thing we're gonna go over. So the bead I'm gonna be tying up in this video is the Silver Bullet Baits. That's from my company. This is our Natty Brown Row and an 8mm bead. They come in a pack of 30. Super sick bead. They're super natural looking and they work really well. I'm gonna grab one of these guys. You're just gonna need a single bead. And the first thing you're gonna do is find the end of your leader line. And slide that bead on. So now it's just free moving, just a bead on my leader line. So the next step here is now to actually tie our hook onto our leader line. So the hooks you're gonna wanna use is something quite small. I'll typically use anywhere from about a size 10 to about a size 14 even. If the water conditions are super clear, I'll go up to a size 14, which is very, very small. Some people use like a size 8 or even a size 6. I prefer something slightly smaller. And it's super important to have nice sticky hooks. So the hook I'm using in this video, it's a little prototype hook I'm trying out for Silver Bullet Baits. This one is a size 10. And the next step is to tie it on to our leader. So now I'm gonna tie it up. I'm going to show you guys the different types of knots and show you the knot that I use and why in particular that I use it. The first knot we're gonna tie up is the basic Palomar knot. So guys, there is our Palomar knot all tied up. Hopefully you guys can see that. It's probably gonna be pretty tough to see. Now, this is a knot that does work and I do use it a fair amount of the time. However, there is a knot that works slightly better and I'm gonna try to explain to you guys as best I can why. So what's really awesome about the Palomar knot is when you tie it, the leader line actually goes through the eye of the hook twice. So it's super strong. Now the one downside of this knot is it ties to the actual eye of the hook rather than the shank of the hook. So if you don't know, the eye is the little round part and the shank is that straight part that goes into the hook bend. So when you tie a Palomar knot, what kind of stinks about this knot is it can actually rotate around that hook eye. So when you're fighting a fish, if that fish was to say dart in the opposite direction, there is a potential that with the way that you're currently standing in the water, that knot will slide to the side of your hook, you will pull it, and it will actually cause that hook to pop. Now obviously that's not what we want because we're going to be losing fish that way. So the Palomar knot is a good knot, however it is not the best knot when you are tying up your leader line because of that. Now this knot does have its applications, which you guys are going to see in the next video. I'm going to show you guys how to tie up a tandem rig, and when I tie a tandem rig, it's inevitable to use the Palomar knot and for a good reason. So now we have our hook again off of our leader line, and the next knot we're going to tie up is called the snell knot. This is a very popular knot again, and the main difference with this knot is it ties to the actual shank of the hook. Okay guys, now we have tied our hook up again, this time using what's called a snell knot. So as I explained, the snell knot actually ties to the shank of the hook rather than the eye of the hook. Now this is important because when you're fighting a fish, no matter what direction I am to pull that line, it's always gonna pull the hook point in the same direction because it's tied to the shank rather than the eye. So what that means is if that fish was to dart in a different direction and I would pull that hook, it's gonna drive that hook further into his mouth rather than causing it to pop if there's any sort of weird directional force or anything like that. So for this reason, I tend to stick with the snell knot when I'm tying just a single hook to my line. So now that we have our hook tied on, we have to take care of our bead. So as I showed you guys before, we have our loose bead, which can slide up and down. That's not gonna help us too much, that's not what we want. We wanna make sure that bead's pegged in place so that it's roughly about 1.5 to 2 inches away from our hook. So what we're gonna do is grab our little silver bullet baits. This is the shorty peg. So it's nice and small. They have a good taper on them. They hold your bead in place quite well. These are what I tend to use most often. And all you're gonna do with that bead, grab that peg and slide it through the hole on the bead. Position doesn't matter right now. You can always slide that bead. And you wanna make the one end sit flush as best you can. So now, this is what our rig looks like. We have that bead, which is no longer moving, and our hook. So our bead's a little bit too high right now, but we're gonna adjust that later. Now, we're gonna grab our little snippers. You can see we have a little bit of excess from that peg. And just clip it off. And now, we have our bead going down to our hook. Now, that bead's gonna be pegged in place quite well, but you can still slide it. And as I said, you wanna be roughly 1.5 inches to 2 inches away from that hook. So right there's a pretty good spot. The hook's in my hand, the bead's sitting right there. And now you're basically ready to go. So now that you have this done, you can simply hook a row bag onto the hook, and that gives you your bead and bag combo, or you can straight up fish just a straight bead, which I do a lot of the time. It's a little bit more natural for the main reason being it looks like a single egg. That's all it really is. So there you guys have it. That is essentially how you would tie your leader all the way down to your hook and rig up a simple rig like a bead. So I want to say thank you guys very much for watching. We are going to have a couple more videos coming out with some advanced rigging, as well as we're going to have one on how to set your actual float depth and how to actually cast. So those are gonna be coming out in the future. Make sure you stay tuned for those, and check out Silver Bullet Baits if you haven't already. Tons of sick products, lots of awesome products to help you guys catch some fish. If you guys want any advice or guidance on what to use, feel free to shoot me a message on the Instagram account or even an email, silverbulletbaits@gmail.com, and I can give you guys a couple tips and some common bead colors that tend to produce fish. Thank you guys very much for watching. Have a great day, and I will see you in the next one. Peace!